as the research capabilities of Sanctuary were improved. The last remaining refugees were arriving there. What next, you may ask? Well, that will be explained eventually. Another heat zone was in order, not just to provide more space for buildings, but also to clear away that pile of wood that was just taking up space. There was time for the generator to cool down. Before the next temperature drop. And by then, a supply of coal would be most recommended. Most recommended because, well, it would mean that it could be left on at that temperature setting. And considering what was coming, that would be a good thing. Although better housing would also be nice to have. And based on the amount of sick and or injured, another medical post was something that was good to have. Largely because it would mean more could be nursed back to health. There were certainly enough engineers to spare. They had no idea what was coming for them. Oh, sorry. Getting a bit ahead of myself. That's later. Although at this point, the main concern was food. A hothouse would at least partially remedy that problem. Although considering that the storage was reaching its maximum capacity. Oh yes, and the drafting machines were completed. A little bit of a wait was in order. Largely because there was not enough steel. For the required research. And one of the scout parties had reached a black spire. And retrieved all the workers there, escorting them back to Sanctuary. Which was a good thing, considering that supplies were running out. And that things were going to get a lot colder. Oh yes, and as for the research, hunting tactics was chosen. That would mean that more... Sorry. Oh yes, and the other scout party found a supply depot. Wood and food was found there. It was sent to a lone boulder to see what was there. Oh yes, and back to hunting tactics. That would mean the same amount of food could be gathered with fewer people. Those workers could be used for other things, such as gathering more coal. Well, considering what's coming, and not just the temperature, they need to make the most of what they have. And this city had expanded rather quickly. And that's even under the circumstances. Well, it wouldn't be too much of a surprise to see a city expand with that many coming in at once. Once the hothouse was complete, the second hothouse to be more precise, food would be not as much of a problem. And during this, she decided to have a coal mine built. And then she realized there was no heat zone nearby, so that would be rather foolish. There was, however, a heat zone to the west, rather than the southeast, so that made more sense. She thought about it. While the rest of the construction work was undertaken, and decided not to build the coal mine there, at least not yet. She had it built where there was already heat. As for a new law, she decided on guard stations.
A new law has passed.
There were some that were afraid that Lord Craven and the Lords would return to at least try and bring things back to the way they were. Although based on what has happened so far, he'd be welcome to try. It was determined that the hothouse wouldn't be enough to supply enough food for all those arriving. So another hunter's hut was made. I mean, built. Yes, that's a better word. It would supply enough food for 100. Although that would... the food supply would need to be improved farther than that. If there was to be any surplus. She was well aware of that. If she wasn't, then she would not have increased the infrastructure as much as she did. And Sanctuary would, well, it'd probably be dead by this point. Thankfully, it wasn't. At least according to what I've got written down here. Although, that's not the end of the story. That's coming later. The food situation had been at least temporarily remedied. One more tent was needed. One right next to the hunter's hut that was constructed. Which meant that the space near that, well, the space that the wood piles were taking up needed to be cleared. More storage was needed. Which meant more steel was needed to provide the steel for resource depots. As for the scout party that had escorted those workers, that was sent westward to the canning workshop. Likely where the fish was canned after being caught. And after that, the survivors of the avalanche of Black Spire was retrieved. Actually, that was them. Sorry. Which meant that, as far as the People's Sanctuary were aware, only one more group of refugees remained. At least by this point, there was now 2 steelworks, which by this point would double the amount of steel that would be coming in. As for the amount of housing, there was enough for all, at least before the next wave of refugees arrive. One of them just wasn't built yet. was still much to do before the last group of refugees arrived. Work didn't stop during the day, just because of that. Nothing would be done otherwise. Well, it's obvious, isn't it? By this point in the day, the hunters' huts could use less workers. Which meant there was more to go around. Flying hunters were researched next, which would mean more food to go around. Once the hunters' huts were upgraded to flying hunters, well, it would only be an increase of enough food for 20 people, but well, 20 if it was standard rations, but it's an increase. And it requires fewer resources than building a completely new one. As for the last group of refugees, they needed shelter. There was also need for more storage capacity of certain resources. And they were quite supportive of the idea of a foreman to make sure efficiency was a priority for them. As for what to do with the space that the wood piles would provide, that well, some more tents would not go amiss. In fact, Flying Hunters research was completed. After that, well... it was decided that lighter scout sleds would be useful. Then again, faster research was also useful, which was why she decided to... well, okay, she delayed that and decided to improve one of the hunters' huts into hunters' hangars. Well, flying hunters, or whatever you want to call them, that's what she did. Considering more immediate increases in food to be more important.
Workday is up. Return your tools.
It was at this point that the last group of refugees arrived at Sanctuary. An additional tent was required. She did it! Their friends and families, brothers and sisters, husbands and wives were safe. They were stronger. She had proved that together they could achieve the impossible. She was glad to hear that. What's next, you may ask? Well... that's what happened later. But before that... there was another night. And at least one of the scout parties found something of note. Well, certainly before the next work shift started. It was at this point that she understood the need for better steel production facilities. She also understood that unless it was necessary, the steam hub near the steel production facilities shouldn't be on unless it's needed. As for more coal, well, there was a coal mine. Wood would not be running out, at least not anytime soon. Although eventually it would need the shelter that the people would have would need improvements if they were to withstand the additional cold. Wood was abundant, steel was not. The night brought news from one of the scout parties around the lone boulder. More locations were found. The sawmill was on the way to the landing site in the distance. That was where that scout party would go next. That way, they could continue exploring the waste without any significant interruption. And they would go even faster once the lighter scout sleds were developed. They could even reconfigure the current scout sleds they had into the lighter configuration. Those ships made her feel uneasy. What were they? There were many theories, and not just from her. None of them were particularly pleasant. As for what laws assign, she decided not to do so just yet, and a young couple were thankful towards their leader. All were saved. They were scattered, but they were together at last. And the temperature increased. Decreased. Requiring the generator to remain on the higher heat setting.
Come, lads. We must work
The only enemy that the people were certain of was the increasing cold. Although there would be something else to worry about as time progressed. Something less discriminating.